Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Lamed Zayin. We begin the fourth perek. Bet Shammai Omrim Kol Hanitanin Al Mizbeach Hachitzon Shenatan B'matana Achat Kiper Ub Chatat Shete Matanot. Bet Shammai says that for a korban where you put the blood on the outside mizbeach, so generally you have to sprinkle it on two opposite corners, and that way when you sprinkle it on the corner, it'll actually go partially on this side and that side. So you end up getting all the sides by putting it onto two corners. So if you have a korban that needs to be sprinkled on the outside mizbeach on two corners, and b'di avad shenatan b'matana achat, but he only put it on one corner, Kippur, it still atones. You fulfill the obligation. You don't have to bring another korban. Lechatechila should be two corners. If you did only one, that's okay. Ubechatat shete matanot. A korban chatat lechatechila requires sprinkling on all four corners. And so in that case, b'di avad, if you did only two corners, you fulfilled the obligation. It atones for the person that brings it. That's Bet Shammai's opinion. Ubet Hillel Omerim af hatat shenetana matana achat kiper. Bet Hillel says even for korban chatat, where lechetechila you should put it on all four corners. If you put only one, then you fulfill the atonement. So Bet Hillel says all korbanot, only one corner is sufficient. For Bet Shammai, if you need two, then it's sufficient for one. If you're supposed to have four, then the minimum would be two. לפיכך, אם נתן את הראשונה כתקנה ואת השנייה חוץ לזמנה כיפר. Therefore, this would be according to both, but let's give the example according to Bet Shammai. In all korbanot, it will be true for Bet Shammai for the regular korbanot, not chatat. So if the kohen sprinkled the first sprinkling on the first corner properly, so then that's it. He fulfilled the obligation to achieve atonement. If he then went to the second corner and he had in mind that he will sprinkle this to consume the rest of the animal outside the time, then it still is mechaper. We do not call this pigul. Why? Because he already fulfilled his obligation in sprinkling it the first time. And so one sprinkling is enough. Therefore, it's not going to go back and retroactively make it no good, even though if one has improper intention through any of the steps, it's no good. But here, he did the last necessary step, and therefore, having chutz lizmano in mind for a second sprinkling will not make it pasul, it's mechaper. V'im natan et harishona chutz lizmana v'et hasheniya chutz limkoma pigul v'chayvin alav karet. And here's another implication. If he sprinkled the first sprinkling chutz lizmana, and the second one had in mind that he's going to consume the meat chutz limkoma, outside the time. Now, normally, if you did this, let's say you did chutz lizmana for the shechita and chutz limkoma for the kabbalah, then we have the cancel out rule that something is pigul and chayav karet only if that's the only problem. If there's another bad intention, then it actually does not become pigul. That's what we would usually say. But in this case, we do not say that, because once he does the first one, chutz lizmana, since the first sprinkling is sufficient to achieve atonement, and the second one is not necessary to achieve atonement, therefore we can ignore the chutz limkoma intention and focus only on the chutz lizmana intention, and therefore it is pigul and chayav karet. We don't have the benefit of helping by including the second bad intention. If you have the second bad intention, it wouldn't be karet. So we focus only on the first one, because once you do the first one, you fulfilled what is necessary. Now, any korban that is meant to be for the blood to be put on the inner mizbeach, the mizbach haketoret, made out of gold, of this one here. And in that case, if the kohen missed any of the placings of blood that he has to place, then it's as if he did not atone. So that's a different law. Then the outer one, you only have to do one according to Bet Hillel. one or two according to Bet Shammai. But the inner one, he has to sprinkle all the necessary sprinklings. Therefore, lefichach natan kulan ketiknan ve'achat shelo ketikna pesula ve'en bo karet. Therefore, if he had, let's say, 4 sprinklings, and he did 3 of them properly, but one he had bad intention to consume the rest of it outside the time, then it's pasul, but it's not karet. Why? Because something only becomes karet, only pigul, if one had intention for the entirety of the blood, the entirety of that action, of that avodah. But here it's only 1 out of 4 that he had the false intention, and therefore it is pasul, but is not karet. But in this case, they're all necessary. Since they're all necessary, it doesn't matter if you did the first one properly or the first one improperly. It doesn't matter which one first, because they're all necessary, so that we look at all of them and we say, well, if he had bad intention for just 1 out of 4, it is pasul, but not karet. Gemara, tenor banan, minayin lanitanin al mizbeach hachitzon shenetanan b'matana achat shekiper. The Gemara begins with a braita that provides a source for the law in the Mishnah and says, how do you know that if you give only 1 blood placement on the outside mizbeach, that you achieve atonement? Talmud Lomar v'dam zebachecha yishafech. The pasuk says that the blood, it's in singular, of your offerings shall be poured. So that means, since that's in singular, that means 1 is sufficient. Now we're going to ask, wait a second, this pasuk, we're going to see is a very popular pasuk, and there are various baraitot that learn multiple laws from it. So we have to figure it all out, because we have a rule that you can't use 1 pasuk for multiple laws. It's in the Talmud Bavli, that law. And so, therefore, we ask, wait, are you going to use dam zebachecha for the fact that you only need 1 placement? Don't we need it for this next baraita? Minayin lechol adamim sheteonin matan dam layesod. How do you know that regarding all blood, one has to place it on the base of the mizbeach? We're referring to the leftovers. You have a korban, you collected the blood, and you took some of that blood and sprinkled it onto the mizbeach. The rest of it, the shirayim, have to be poured onto the base of the mizbeach. The Torah does say this once regarding a korban hatat in Vayikra 4:25. But what about other korbanot? How do you know that that's true? Talmud Lomar v'dam zebachecha yishafech, from this very pasuk that says, the blood of your offerings you shall pour, and which we're understanding now to pour onto the base of the mizbeach. So how could you use it for the placing 1 time? Don't we need it for the law of pouring it onto the base? And the answer is no. We can learn this second law from another place. Nafkala medirbi. Tanya, Rabbi Omer, v'hanishar badam yimase, shen tamud omar badam, uma tamud omar badam. We're going to learn it from this pasuk in Vayikra. Let's look at it inside. It says, v'hiza midam hachatat al kir mizbeach. You're going to sprinkle from the blood of the chatat onto the wall of the mizbeach. And then it says, v'hanishar badam yimase el yesod hamizbeach chatatu. And the rest of the blood. Now this word badam is extra, because I already know it's talking about midam. It says here, v'hiza midam. So it could have just said hanishar. The rest of it will be squeezed out, wrung out at the bottom of the mizbeach, because it's a korban hatat. So therefore, since that word dam is extra, what does it come to teach me? Because I only know regarding korbanot that require 4 placements on the mizbeach, meaning korban hatat, that's what requires 4 placements, that blood has to be poured onto the base, the leftover. Shar damim minayin, but what about other types of korbanot? Talmud Omar v'nishar badam yimaseh. So therefore, this pasuk from Vayikra 5 comes to teach us that the rest of badam, since this badam is an extra word, that teaches regarding all other korbanot. And therefore, since I can learn that law from Vayikra Vav Tet, therefore, that leaves that pasuk from Devarim 12, V'dam zevachecha yishafech, is open, and we can use it to learn the law of the Mishnah. Next question, Vakati lahachi hu da'ata. Wait a second. The pasuk from Devarim, can we really use it for the law of the Mishnah that one sprinkling is enough? We use it in another baraita. How do you know that regarding korbanot, most types of korbanot, you have to sprinkle the blood onto the mizbeach from far away? Now, what if instead of doing zerika, you did sheficha? You poured it. Some korbanot you have to pour instead of sprinkling. So what if you did pouring instead of sprinkling? How do you know that you still fulfilled the mitzvah and it's a valid korban? Because it says dam zevachecha yishafech zevachecha, all types of zevachim. If you pour it, that's okay. So now we need this pasuk for this law, that anything can be, that sprinkling is included within pouring. So how can we use it for the law of the Mishnah? And the answer is Sabalak Rabbi Akiba. The first baraita that we quoted that derives the source for our Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Akiba. And Rabbi Akiba disagrees with this baraita. Tamar lo zerika bichlal sheficha v'lo sheficha bichlal zerika. Rabbi Akiba thinks that sprinkling is not included within pouring, and pouring is not included within sprinkling. If you sprinkle something that you're supposed to pour, or vice versa, then it does not count. And therefore, since he disagrees with the law, he certainly doesn't need a pasuk to derive to derive that law. Ditnan. And where do we see that Rabbi Akiba thinks that they are not included in the other? Well, we're going to learn it from the berachot that one says regarding a korban pesach and a korban zevach, which means the korban chagiga. Both of them you have to say a beracha when you say it. Now, here's the Mishnah Pesachim. Ditnan. Berach birkat pesach patar et shel zebach. Shel zebach lo patar et pesach divrei Rabbi Ishmael. We're going to see Rabbi Akiva in a second. But first, let's see Rabbi Ishmael. He says, if one said the beracha about for korban pesach, before you eat korban pesach, you have to say a beracha. Shel kedushan b'sotav v'sivanu lechol ha-pesach. Once you said that mitzvah, then you no longer have to say the beracha for the korban chagiga. The korban chagiga mitzvah beracha would be asher kedusha b'mitzvotav v'sivanu lechol et hazevach. So that's one. The zevach is included in Pesach, but not the other way around. If you said the beracha on the korban chagiga, which is a type of korban shelamim, you did not fulfill the korban Pesach. The reason is because the blood of Pesach is poured. Okay, so because it's poured and the zevach is sprinkled, therefore Rabbi Ishmael is the opinion of that baraita that says sprinkling is included within pouring. Pouring is the more general category. So therefore, once you said the beracha for korban pesach, which is poured, since that blood is poured, and pouring includes things that are sprinkled, therefore the beracha of korban pesach covers the korban chagiga. So once you said that, you don't have to say the other. Whereas it's not the other way around. Zerika is more specific than pouring, and so if you only said the beracha of for zevach, which is sprinkled, that does not include pesach, which is poured. So that is all according to Rabbi Akiva. However, according to Rabbi Ishmael. However, Rabbi Akiva Omer lo zo poteret zo v'lo zo poteret zo. Rabbi Akiva says the beracha of each is independent, and the beracha on pesach will not cover a zevach, and zevach will not cover a Pesach. Why? Because sprinkling is not included in pouring, and pouring is not included in sprinkling, according to Rabbi Akiva. So that's where we see that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with this whole law, and therefore does not need our pasuk in Devarim to teach us that law. But now we ask further, our pasuk from Devarim, is it coming to teach us the law of our Mishnah, that one sprinkling is enough, as it says in the first baraita that we quoted in the Gemara? Don't we need that same pasuk for another baraita, where we learn? Rabbi Ishmael Omer, mitoch shene'emar ach bechor shor o bechor kesef o bechor ayez v'gomer. Let's look at that pasuk before we go further. Here it says, but the firstling, the firstborn of an ox or a sheep or a goat, Latifeh kodeshem, you don't redeem them for money because they're holy. Etamam tizrok ala mizbeach, where they're going to be a korban, and you're going to sprinkle the blood onto the mizbeach. Vetchelbam taktir, and you're going to burn their fats. Isher lerech nichoach ladonai. It continues and says, Ubsaram yelach, and the flesh of it will be to you. To you is referring to the Kohanim, because any farmer who has a firstborn animal has to give it to the Kohen. And if it doesn't have a mum, the Kohen sacrifices it, burns part of it, puts the blood, and then eats the rest. Will be his. The law also is that if it gets a mum and then you can't sacrifice it, then the Kohen can just keep it for himself. Either way, it goes to the Kohen. So we're going to analyze all these words here. Now the Baraita says, fine, I know regarding a bechor animal that you have to sprinkle the blood and you have to burn some sacrificial parts on the mizbeach. But what about ma'aser animal? Every 10th animal, the owner can keep, but he has to bring it as a korban. And korban pesach, it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah regarding ma'asar behema and korban pesach, it doesn't say explicitly that you have to sprinkle the blood or pour the blood and put some of the parts on the mizbeach. So that's surprising. Never says that. So how do we know? Minayin. And it quotes our pasuk, Talmud Omar V'dam zebachecha yishafech. Our pasuk from Devarim that says the blood of all of your offerings you have to pour. And so from here we see that this will apply also to Korban Pesach and to Ma'aser. So now we use this pasuk for something else. How can we use it above? This is going to be a question on two people. Number one, on the author of the opening Baraita that uses this pasuk to teach me that all you need is one sprinkling. It's also going to be a challenge to Rabbi Ishmael, because Rabbi Ishmael is, we said, is the opinion that would be the author of this Baraita that says that sprinkling is included within pouring. And so now, this Baraita is also to be Ishmael. So how can Rabbi Ishmael himself learn two things from one pasuk? Okay, first we're going to answer the first question about the Baraita, the opening Baraita. What about how can you use this pasuk for the law of the Mishnah? Don't you need it for the law of Maaser and Pesach? And the answer is Savar la Rabbi Yosef Galili. No, the Tana of the opening Baraita can follow the opinion of Rabbi Yosef Galili. What does he say? The Tanya, Rabbi Yosef Galili Omer, Damo lo ne'emar ela damam, chelbo lo ne'emar ela chelbam. Look at this pasuk. This pasuk itself says that regarding a bechor, you take et damam. It doesn't say damo singular, which would bechor. The word bechor is singular, but yet it says the bloods, and also says the fats. Right? Not one chelbo, it's fat, but the fat of many animals. What other animals are we talking about? Limed al bechor maaser upesach shetaun matan damim ve'emurim legabe hamizbeach. So Rabbi Yosef Galili says, I of course I agree with the law that you have to offer the blood and fats of Korban Pesach and Ma'aser, but I don't need to learn it from Dam Zebachecha Yishafech. I can learn it from this very pasuk about Bechor, from the plural Damam and Chelbo, Damam and Chelbam, and therefore that leaves open the Devarim pasuk to learn the law of our Mishnah. Good, so we solved that problem. But now to the other question, Rabbi Ishmael, Haikera mapik le lahachi mapik le lahachi. Rabbi Ishmael, how can you use the same pasuk to teach two things? And the answer is Teret Taneh alibad Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael himself must have only taught one, but we have two traditions about what Rabbi Ishmael said. Some students said he thought this, some tradents that remembered a tradition named Rabbi Ishmael thought it was that. So we have two traditions in the name of Rabbi Ishmael, but he must have only said one or the other. Now back to analyzing that pasuk, we can understand the next pasuk, 18:18. According to the Rabbi Ishmael, who says that the whole thing is talking about a bechor, and that's why it says in the next pasuk, the flesh will be yours. Yours meaning it will belong to the Kohen. According to Rabbi Ishmael, he's going to say that damam, the plural, and chelbam, plural, is referring to all three types of animals that are mentioned here, ox, sheep, and goat. So their bloods, all their blood, and chelbam, all their these types of animals, fats will be burnt, and their flesh, yelach, will go to the kohen. So if you say that all the things in this pasuk is referring to different types of bechor animals, that's why it makes sense that yelach, it goes to the kohen. However, Ela l'Rabbi Ishmael, demoki le name b'maaseru Pesach, maaseru Pesach ba'alim achli le, mayu b'saram yelach. According to Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, he says that damam and chelbam refers to Korban Pesach and maaser, but the meat of Korban Pesach and but the meat ubsaram of Korban Pesach and Maaser is not yelach, doesn't go to the Kohanim, but rather is given to the owners. So if this ubsaram is referring to the pasuk right before, and the pasuk right before is referring to not only Bechor but also Pesach and Maaser, then it shouldn't say Besaram Yelach. How can it be Yosei Galili explain that? And he could answer Echad Tam ve'Echad Ba'amum. No, when it says Ubsaram here, it's not referring to the Chelbam and Damam, which is Korban Pesach and Maaser. The plural of Ubsaram is referring to multiple types of Bechor, if it has a mum or doesn't have a mum. And either way, it goes to the Kohen. Limed al bechor ba'amum shenitan lakohen shelo masinu lo bechor Torah kula. And we need this pasuk to teach us that the firstborn, even if it has a blemish, you give it to the Kohen, because you don't find this statement explicit anywhere in the Torah. You might think if it has a mum that the owner keeps it. Not true. You have to give it to the Kohen either way. And that's what he learns from that plural ubsaram yelach. All flesh of bechor, whether baal mum or tam, goes to the Kohen. Rabbi Ishmael, and Rabbi Ishmael, since he learned ubsaram is referring to all three types of animals, because that's what it means. Damam and chelbam and bsaram is all three types of animals. So how does he derive the law that a baal mum also goes to the Kohen? And the answer is nafkale mi lecha yiyeh desefa. He can learn it from the end of the pasuk that says again, Lecha yiyeh. This is a repetition. It already says yiyeh. Why do I need lecha yiyeh? Oh, that's teaching me that a baal mum, a bechor animal that has a blemish, also goes to the Kohen. Bishlama l'Rabbi Yosef Galili, demoki le name b'maaseru Pesach, hanu dichtib lo tifte ki kodeshem hem kerebin ve'en timuratan kereva. Now, a follow-up discussion about this pasuk. We understand this pasuk according to Rabbi Yosef Galili, because he said that the plural damam and chelbam in this pasuk are referring to a maaser behema and korban Pesach. That makes sense why it says lo tifte, they cannot be redeemed ki kodeshem, because they are holy. From the fact that it learns that these are holy, we learn that these will be sacrificed hem kerebin ve'en timuratan kereva. But regarding a bechor, if you try to substitute the bechor for a different animal, then the bechor, original one, gets sacrificed, but the one that you substituted with does not get sacrificed. Rather, you have to just wait till it gets a mum, and then it's eaten by the owner. That law that applies to bechor also applies to Maaser and Pesach. This is different from most other korbanot. If you have just a regular korban, whatever, olah, and you try to make a substitute, so the original is sacrificed and the substitute will also be sacrificed. Both are sacrificed. But regarding a bechor and korban and Maaser and Pesach, we'll see Pesach, it depends when it happens. But regarding these three, if you make a substitute, only the original is sacrificed, but the substitute is holy, but is not sacrificed. As you wait till it gets a blemish, and then the owner can eat it. So according to the Rabbi Yosef Galili, we can derive all three laws from this one pasuk. Now we see that this is the law from a Mishnah Masechet Timurat, Itnan. Timurat bechor u'maaser. Hen uvladan, uvlad veladan ad sof kol ha'olam. Hare hen kebechor u'maaser v'ye'achlu b'muman be'alim. If you make you're not allowed to make a substitute for an animal, but if you do, you violate it, then the substitution for bechor or maaser behema, the substitute animal and its offspring, if it's a female and has offspring and the offspring of the offspring until forever, they will be holy like the original bechor and maaser. However, although they are holy, they are not sacrificed. Rather, you wait till it gets blemished and then the owner can eat it. Utnan, and furthermore, there's another Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim, where it says, Utnan amar Rabbi Yehoshua, Shamati she'tmurat Pesach kereba, utmurat Pesach ena kereba, ve'en li lefaresh. He says, I heard a tradition. One tradition says that the substitute of a Pesach is offered, but the substitute, and I heard another tradition that the substitute of Pesach is not offered, and I cannot reconcile their opposite. Now we're going to reconcile in just a minute and explain that if you try to substitute a Korban Pesach before the 14th of Nisan, then it will not be sacrificed, because that's the law of Pesach, like Bechor and Maaser. If, however, you substitute a Korban Pesach after Pesach is finished, in which case the animal that was designated as a Korban Pesach transforms into a Shelamim, and therefore you're substituting basically Shelamim, and the Shelamim, or the substitute, is offered as the original, and the substitute is also offered. So that's what it means here when he says, I heard that the Tumurah of Pesach is Kereba. That's talking about after Pesach when it turns into a Shelamim. But before Pesach, it is not. So this is the here we see the law that these three animals, their substitute is not offered. And according to the Biosai Galili, we have a pasuk that teaches all three of them. But according to Ishmael, he says that this pasuk is referring only to Bechor, and the plural, damam, mumam, is referring to all the types of animals, the ox, the sheep, the goat, of the different types of Bechor. Then Maaser u'behepesach delakireba tumratan minaleh. Then we have this pasuk will teach me about Bechor, that it is holy, but not the substitute is not offered. So how does he have a source for Maaser and Pesach that their substitute is not offered as a korban? And the answer is Maaser gamar avaram bechor. For Maaser, we have a gezerah shava. It says v'habarta regarding korban Pesach, and says v'ya'avor tachat hashabet regarding Maaser. And so there you go. That's bechor and Maaser. So we see those two. But Pesach behedjaketi kataba be. For Pesach, we have the pasuk itself says it. We don't have to derive it from something else. Kesef matamud omar im kesef. Okay, it says it has to be a lamb. So why does it say im kesef? What's the extra word im? L'rabot temurata pesach achara pesach. That comes to include the substitute of a Korban Pesach after Pesach, that will be offered, because that turns into a Shelamim. Shetikrav Shelamim. Yachol af lifnei Pesach ken. Now you might think even before Pesach, a substitute of a Pesach will be also a Pesach and sacrificed. Tomod Marhu. The next word in the pasuk is imkeseb hu makriv. So the word hu is a limiting word to say no, only if it's after Pesach. But before Pesach, if you try to substitute it, then the substitute will not be sacrificed. Okay, so we solved that problem. Now, all the way back to the beginning. V'chol hanach tanaed demapeki le lahai dam zebachecha yishafech lidrasha charina. Hai kol anitanin al mizbeach hachison shenetanan matana achat shekiper mina lehu. All of these tanaim, we saw a series of baraitot that learn various things from this pasuk dam zebachecha yishafech. So we kept saying, our baraita does not follow that opinion or that opinion, that opinion. Fine, we saved our original baraita. But those Tanaim who use this pasuk for other laws, where will they learn the law of our Mishnah that as long as you put just one sprinkling, then you achieved atonement? They can't use this pasuk because they already use it for something else. And the answer is Sabri lehu kebet Hillel damri af hatat shenetana matana achat kiper ve'afinan kulahu mehatat. They all agree with Bet Hillel, who say that even a korban hatat, which usually you need 4, it's enough if you need 1, and they will learn all the other korbanot from korban hatat. And we're about to see in the next section where Bet Hillel learns that a korban hatat needs only 1. Ve'achatat shete matanot. So back to the Mishnah where Bet Shammai says, lecha techila, you should have 4 sprinklings for a chatat, but b'di'avad, you need at least 2. And according to Bet Hillel, it's okay even to have 1 for a korban chatat. Amar Rav Huna mai ta'amad de Bet Shammai. Rav Huna asked, what is the source for Bet Shammai that you need at least 2 out of the 4 lecha techila, 2 b'di'avad? Because the pasuk says karnot, harekan 6, 4 lemisva, ושתיים לעקב. Because in Vayikra chapter 4, it says the word karnot 3 times, and this is all talking about korban hatat. This whole chapter is about different types of korban hatat. Natan al karnot mizbach ha'olah. Notice that karnot is spelled haser, without a vav. So that, if you just look at the consonants, you could read it karnat, which would be singular, the one horn, but the way it's pronounced, it's karnot. So that's in this pasuk, and it appears again here, al karnot hamizbech, but again spelt without a vav, and then again over here, karnot, also spelled without a vav. So Bet Shammai is going to focus on the way it's pronounced. And since it's pronounced in plural, therefore 2, 4, 6, you have 6 altogether. Well, there are only 4 corners of the Mizbeach, so why do you have 6 mentions? That means 4 is for the mitzvah. Mitzvah means lechatechila, to do the mitzvah the best way, sprinkle on all 4. But that takes care of 4 of them. There's 2 left over. Those 2 left over are to teach that you need 2 at least in order to even fulfill the obligation. Ubet Hillel, karnat, hare kan arba, shalosh mitzvah, achat le'akeb. Bet Hillel says we're going to look at the way it's written, and it's written karnat in 2 of them, and maybe he had in his version another vav, and he did have 1 vav in 1 of them. And so, if we look at the way it's written, so we see what karnat is singular, and karnot is plural with a vav, assuming that he did have a vav there in 1 of them. And so that's 1, 2, plus 2 is 4. So now what are you going to do with 4? Shalosh mitzvah, achat le'akev. 3 of them means is for the best way to do it, and 1 is the absolute necessary. So 1 absolute necessary, and then 3 more besides the 1 to make all 4 would be for the mitzvah lechatechila. Mitzvah. Wait a second, how do you know it's 3 and 1? Maybe all 4 is for lechatechila, but b'diavad, if you did 0, it's still okay. No, that doesn't make sense. Kapara bichdi lashkachan. We never find that you get atonement for nothing, for not doing any sprinkling of the blood on the Mizbeach. You can't do 0, so it has to be at least 1. Or another answer for Bet Hillel, ahane mikra v'ahane masoret. We're actually going to look both at mikra, the way it's pronounced, and masoret is the tradition of how it's written. We're going to take both of them and take the average. The way it's pronounced will add 1 because you have a lot of plurals, and the way it's written will take away 1. So the way it's pronounced, you get 6. The way it's written, you'll get 4, and so the average of that will end up being 5. What are you going to do with 5? Oh, we could say 4 is for lechatechila, and then 1 left over is for the absolute minimum. That's another way to read Bet Hillel. Ela me'ata letotafot. Hare kan arba. Okay, now if you apply that same methodology to the tefillin? Tefillin, it says 3 times, once in Shemot and twice in Devarim, and twice it says totafat, and totafat is in singular, and once totafot in plural. Again, here, it's not the same as what we have in our Masoretic text, but you could look at here at Tosafot and what they say about that. Anyway, hakerek kan arba, according to that spelling, if you just look at the spelling of the words, that's 1, 2 plus 2 is 4. Ahani kera v'ahani masoret chamisha bate ba'el me'evad. But if you do it the way you read it also, and take the average, well, the way you read it is 3 plurals, that's 6. So we'll take the average of 4 and 6, and we get 5. So does that mean that you should have 5 compartments in the tefillin? We don't do that. That's not the tradition. In fact, you're not allowed to do that. So, but if you apply the same methodology over here, that you take the average of the pronunciation and the written text, then you'll end up with 5 sections of the tefillin. But that's not right. And the answer is, Savar like Rabbi Akiba. Bet Hillel can follow Rabbi Akiba. The other way around. Rabbi Akiba was later. But they could follow this. He can follow this methodology. Damar tot bechatfi shetayim pat bafriki shetayim. We learned that's 4 because the word tot in this language of Katpi means 2, and pat in Afriki language also means 2. So 2 plus 2 is 4. That's why we know that there's 4 sections from the word totafot, from the derivation, the etymology of the 2 words, tat and pat. Elamata basukot 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 ahani mikra v'ahani masoret chamsha dafnata ba'elam evad. All right, fine. You've solved the problem for tefillin. What about for a sukkah, where it says 3 times the word sukkot, twice is sukat, sukat is singular, and once with a vav is plural. So that would be 4 if you take the way it's written. But the way it's pronounced, you'd get 6. So take the average and you get 5. Does that mean you have to have a pentagon shaped sukkah? That doesn't make sense. We don't do that. Hatam chad kera kole legufe vechad lischacha. Atay hilcheta ugra'ata lashilishit veokimta atefach. No, there we need one of those instances just to teach us that you have to sit in the sukkah at all. Just need the basic law. And you need another one to tell me that you need schach, you need a covering. So now we have only 3. It is 5, in fact, but now we have only 3 left. And so we have 3 walls, and the halacha and the oral tradition tells us that one of the walls can even be small, even if just 1 handbreadth. You don't need 3 full walls, but rather 2 full walls and 1 partial wall. And so that's fine. We can apply that methodology to sukkah and still get to the right answer. Last problem, regarding a woman who gives birth to a daughter, she is tameh for 2 weeks. That's the way it's pronounced. That's the tradition. But if you just look at the consonants, it's shiv'im. It's 70. So now maybe we should take both, and according to your methodology, and take the average. Since you can read it 14 days, and you can also, the letters themselves are 14 days, but you can also read it 70 days, so maybe we should take the average and make it 42 days, and she's going to be tameh for 42 days. But that's not the halacha. And the answer is, Shaneh hatam dichtiv kinidata. The next words, v'tameh shivu'ayim, shall be tameh for 2 weeks, as a nida. Well, a nida is tameh for 1 week. So the point is that she is like a nida, except that it's twice as long. So it's comparing it to a nida, but just twice as long. And not, if you say 70, will not be comparable at all. And so from the context, it's clear that it's only shivu'ayim and not shiv'im. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.